I wanted to have a look at doing some design work in SketchUp, and especially, I'll just move across to the next screen, especially looking at some of these kind of like aesthetic style, designs. They're often kind of like simple geometric structural designs that repeat. Generally, they tend to use these like muted color palettes and these sort of interesting architectural forms. So they're often kind of like really pure and minimalist in their style. So a good way to get going with this is to model the basic model up in SketchUp, and then take it into a more complex modeler that can do the rendering work, which is applying lighting and getting the scene looking really nice and clean, ready for what we call a render, which is like a high quality photograph of the scene using a virtual camera. So what I'm doing today is I'm in SketchUp. I've just got the free version of it open up, so you can go to sketchup.com and just use the free online version of SketchUp for starters, and so you'll just can log in using your school email address or whatever email address you want to use if you're not at school, and then you can get into SketchUp. It's free. It's really great. As far as once you actually create a new file and you get things going, it's worth setting up your down under app settings, and here we go. We just want to make sure we're running in default template and using decimal in millimeters. So that's the standard that we use in Australia. And so if we start out with that, it'll make life easy for us. So I've got that set up and that's all cool. So I'm coming back to my scene here, and so let's have a look at the technique that we can use. There's a few different ways actually you can do this, but you can see that we always start out with a person in our scene here. They're really just to give us a scale. That guy's hanging around with a ukulele. We don't want that, so let's just hit delete. So I'm just dragged around the object and hit delete, and we're good. Okay, so I'm going to start out by creating, say, a square base for our scene. And as I drag out, you can see I can move my pencil around, and it's going to give me different sizes. So if I look down here in the bottom right hand corner, you can see there's dimensions. So if I just take my hands off the keyboard or off the trackpad or mouse, whatever you're using, without clicking, which is quite counterintuitive, but that's the way we're going to do it. And then I type in some dimensions. So I might go like 15 meters, which would be 15,000, comma 15,000. Okay, so it's a 15 by 15 meter square I'm going to create. So you can see the numbers all went into dimensions down in that bottom right hand corner. I just hit return, and you can see now it's created that square for me at that size. Now you can move around the scene. I like to use holding down shift and middle mouse button, but you can use your trackpad. 2 fingers on the trackpad will drag you around as well. And first thing that we might do here is we might give this think of this as like a concrete slab. So we might make it like 300 mil thick for starters, and it's done. Okay, so that's pretty good. Now, one thing that SketchUp does is it likes to weld objects onto other objects. So if I make a square now and I have this cube here, and if I try to move the cube, you'll see that it kind of like it's stuck and goes all weird. It's stuck to the base and it doesn't really like getting moved. So what we do to avoid that problem is we make this an object. So we just basically triple click on it. It'll select everything that's joined, which is this bottom slab. I'm going to do a right click, or you can use your control, and I'm going to just make it a group. Okay, once it's become a group, it means that it won't stick to other objects. So it's good to have that as a separate object. It means then we can make objects that sit on top of this, and we can duplicate them out. So like we looked at these arches, which means we can make one arch sitting on this, and then we can like duplicate them out, which is a good way to go. Okay, so let's have a look. Let's create maybe a set of those arches just to start out with. So what I'm going to do is grab my square, and I'm going to start to draw, and I'm going to draw on top of this. That's cool, like this. And we've got to think about the real world, how thick you might have this. So we might have it, say, what are we going to have? We might have 4 meters wide, so it'll be 4,000, and we might have it 500 millimeters thick for starters, so we'll go 500. Okay, and it's going to draw me something that looks like that. Good one. Okay, so then I'm going to raise this up. So I'm just going to, I can triple click to select the whole thing, and then I'm going to just raise it up, and you can see it's telling me the distance, and it doesn't really matter, but I might come up, I might come up 4,000. So I'll just, sometimes I'll just pull it up to check. So let's go 4,000. Good one. Okay. So this is what's going to become our archway. So there's a few different ways you can do this, but I'm going to draw the shape of my archway onto this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my pencil, and I'm going to come in, and I'm going to come in maybe 500. Okay, so that's drawn in 500. And now if I move my pencil, it'll give me midpoint. I don't want midpoint, I want this other point, end point, and I'll just come straight down. So it lights up blue when I want to do that. I'm going to use my pencil again. I'm going to come across 500. So I type in 500, and then when I grab my pencil and I slide across, it'll just stop on that end point. I can drag it down. Okay, so that's good. That's getting me quite sorted. And then I want to create an arch for to go across. So I might come up with this arch. I might come up, say, no more than 2,000, I don't think. 2,000. Okay, so now I'll just bring my pencil up, and it'll click and say endpoint. That's good. And I come across, you can see it lights up red, which means it's going across. So that gives me the start of my arch. But now I just want to put in my actual arched shape to make it work. So what I'm going to do is I need my arch tool. So from the menu here, I can go from point, and you can see here now it gives me, there's different arc tools. I'm going to use the 2-point arc, which is pretty simple. We'll click on the first spot, come across to the second spot. Oops. I'll just draw across this. So I've messed that up. If you see it light up purple like that, it usually means that it's not really clicking properly. Okay, that's better. So it's coming across, and I can set the height of my arch. Okay, so that's pretty good. I'm just going to guess it a little bit at the moment. That looks pretty good. And now what you'll see is that I can select each of these panels here. So I might just grab this middle bit, and I can delete that. So I might use the eraser. I can just run over it. Good one. And now I want to get rid of this other material in the middle, but I might actually get rid of these lines here because we don't need them. So using my eraser, and then I'm going to grab this push-pull tool, and I'm going to start pushing it through the back. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to touch the back. So see how it said on edge? If you get it exactly touching that back edge, it'll just delete the whole thing. So I'll show you that again. I'll rotate it a bit so you can see. I start pushing it, so I've got it active using push-pull, and now if I just touch that on edge with the arrow and let go, you can see it makes the whole thing disappear. So that gives us that arch that we can start to work with, which is really handy. So then I can triple click on that, which will select the whole thing, and I can now go make it a group. Excellent. And then what I can do is, once I've got one arch, it's really good, I can start to duplicate this. So I can, what we can do is use the move tool, and the move tool is that cross and it moves in any direction. But if I hit my arrow keys, you'll see I can push it in different to move only in one direction. So in this case, I'm going to use my left arrow, and as I hold down my control, you'll see it'll make another arch, which is kind of handy. So I can say, yep, that's good, let go when I'm happy with it, and then without clicking on anything else, I could go X7 to make 7 of them. So you can see down in the bottom right there, it's got that X7, and if I hit return, you'll see now it'll make 7 of those arches. So then I can start to get that same kind of look. So we've got ourselves, yeah, you can see now we've got arches where we can look down through, just in the same way that when we look at this kind of scene, we've got it happening. Okay, I've got a little bit of, whoops, I'll go back to this one. I've got a few more arches, but the proportions aren't quite the same, but it's pretty close. Okay, so that's going to get us going with that technique. Pay attention to your kind of like the aesthetics with this is really critical, the dimensions and all that sort of thing as you go along. But now that you're starting to get the feel for it, you'll be able to say add in an extra wall. So we might say add in a wall here. So we might start it here and come along, and we can add in a wall here. We can kind of guess the size, or we can dial it in exactly. It's up to you. And we might then use our push-pull tool, and then we can sort of start to give this a little bit more of a closed off appearance. So if we were starting to look at it from an angle, it would be, we could see that wall. It's not just sort of going into nothing. So you can start to add that around your scene. If we have a look, I had some other scenes here. So look at this one. See, this has got some high arches here. We've got some square arches in the background. So if we're going to make some square arches, oh sorry, I keep going to that other tab. Let's have a look here. So we might, let me just get rid of these arches for starters. So I can just sort of draw around all those and move them out of the way. So let's just move them over here. Remember, if I hit my arrow key, they'll move along just in one direction. So let's have a look at this wall here. If we wanted to do a square arch, we can just draw a square on the side. It can be accurate using our numbers, or we can do it freestyle. It's up to you. And then we can click on that, what will become a doorway, or a portal through this, and then we click in exactly the same way. So that's pretty good. You'll notice in that it's got some of these square kind of like depressions in the walls, so we can again we can draw on with our square tool. We can push pull, and we can just push them in a little bit, and that'll give us that type of situation as well. So really just using some simple tools, we're able to really kind of easily start to create something that that'll start to look good. And once we take it into a more complex modeler, we can start to build it in a more complex way. So this we might then just sort of rule down here, and we could then push pull this out, and that gives us more wall geometry to work with. There's some interesting steps and things in that image if we have a look, so we can see them going up through here. yeah, their steps are fun to create. We'll have a look at that in another video because they're just, they're another step up in complexity. But they're basically, we do something similar to these arches, create one, duplicate them out. But we'll do that in another video, okay? So have a mess around with this today, get the feel for it. As you're going along, you can come down here and click on the goggles, and they will bring up this tab where we've got shadows off. So it's a bit of extra fun. Once we start to turn shadows on, things start to really come to life. You can dial in the day and the time, and you can start to get some interesting lighting starting to happen with your scene, just to get a feel for how it's going to work. But we will relight it in Blender once we get there, okay? So you don't need to stress about lighting too much for the moment, but that is pretty much how you go about starting to create a three-dimensional shape that we can, get looking good. All right, so thanks for that. We'll come back, we'll have a look at stairs in the next video, so I'll see you then.